It's among the most profitable car makers in the world. Yet in 2013, this French car maker was facing bankruptcy. Since then, its new chief executive has achieved a remarkable turnaround and then done it again across the border in Germany.
This is Bloomberg Turnaround. Join me to see how Carlos Tavares put PSA Peugeot Citroen back in the race.
It's a source of pride for the nation, and also it's showing up that the manufacturing business in France is not over.
Hello, nice to see you. David Tweed.
I met the man who is one of Europe's most influential car executives at his Paris headquarters.
5 years ago, you were facing a near-death experience, so we need to keep on being agile. We understand how important it is to move around the roadblocks. And the more chaotic the world around us is, the more agility is an asset for a company like ours.
PSA owns the brands Peugeot, Citroen, DS Automobile, Opel and Vauxhall. In 2018, the combined group reported record earnings, and its auto unit made a return on sales of 7.6%, rivaling its German peers. Profit was driven by sales of the European Car of the Year, the Peugeot 3008 SUV. The record result was also helped by Opel Vauxhall, which PSA bought from General Motors in 2017 and turned around after 2 decades of losses.
PSA was really on its knees. They lost $8 billion over 2 years. Most industry observers had counted them out. They were too slow. And then Carlos Tavares came in and in the matter of a few years took out a lot of cost, improved efficiency, improved asset structure.
Tavares' turnaround formula was called back in the race. Cut the number of models in each brand, make more profit on each, reduce the numbers of platforms they're made on, and cut costs. Everywhere.
He was capable to convince all the people that the number of models they used to have in the group was not fitting with the market requirements. And so reducing the manufacturing complexity was about to revamp the product lineup. And it was very hard to convince them to do that because obviously it's affecting the organization around the plants, and obviously reducing the cost was a bit painful.
Key was the repositioning of brands that had been confusing customers. DS on top, Peugeot in the middle, and Citroen the value proposition.
We want to focus the creative energy of the company on a more limited number of products, completely aligned with the expectations of the markets in which we operate.
The transformation could be seen in the share price, reaching a low at the end of 2012 at the depths of the crisis. Since Tavares' appointment was announced at the end of 2013, the shares have more than doubled. PSA has been transforming itself for years. I visited Peugeot's birthplace at Sochaux in eastern France, where the vast plant is being modernised. The Peugeot brothers started a rolling steel mill in 1810, making saws, coffee, pepper and salt grinders, even cages for crinoline dressers.
So one of the things they branched out into was to make penny farthing bicycles, but they were also making carriages and carts that needed horses. And then the idea came up to the brothers Peugeot, what if we put an engine in front of our carriage?
Fast forward to the second half of the 20th century, and Peugeot was one of the most prestigious industrial jewels in a resplendent France, making cars for a growing middle class. In the 1970s, it bought Citroën, which was struggling, and PSA Peugeot Citroën was born. But by the time the global financial crisis hit in 2008, the company had become unwieldy, producing too many models on too many platforms with brands that confused consumers. Between July 2007 and the end of 2008, the share price dropped more than 80%. The company was burning through billions. Peugeot needed outside help. By 2013, talks started for the French state and China's Dongfeng Motor to buy 14% each, for the family to halve its holdings, and Carlos Tavares was appointed. Tavares started his career in 1981 as a test driver at Renault. By 2011, he was Renault's chief operating officer, second only to Carlos Ghosn. Then came the Bloomberg interview, in which Tavares laid out his personal ambitions.
It was really surprising, actually, because here you have somebody who is the right-hand man for Renault-Nissan, which was a very successful company at the time, didn't have any of the problems that you see today. Essentially saying, I'd really like to become a CEO, and if I have to leave my current company to do it, I will.
He didn't last much longer at Renault after that. No matter. By the end of 2013, he was appointed to the top job at Peugeot. A month after assuming the CEO position, Tavares announced his turnaround plan. Back in the race.
He's a ruthless cost cutter, and he's had to be, and that's why Peugeot has margins at a similar level to the likes of BMW over the past year, although some of that is to do with restructuring charges and just experience. You know, he's been in the industry a long time.
I'm on the Avenue de la Grande Armée in Paris. If you look up the end there, you can see the Arc de Triomphe. That means we're in central Paris. Now, if you look over here, you can see the former headquarters of the PSA Group. I say former headquarters because Carlos Tavares moved the headquarters to the suburbs, much cheaper, all part of the cost-cutting drive.
The new headquarters is at Rueil-Malmaison, about 8 miles from the centre of Paris. Coming up, we'll take a look at how Tavares, known for asking colleagues to switch off office lights, injected a cost-cutting culture into the company and to get more from the man himself.
We started from a very simple recognition, which was that if we are in trouble, it's not because we're not working enough. We are working like hell.
In his 5 years at the helm, Carlos Tavares has managed to return not just Peugeot Citroen to profitability, but the German car maker Opel as well.
The interesting thing is that we've got French cars coming off the production line and German cars coming off the same production line.
The Peugeot 3008 and Opel's Grandland X. Two quite distinct cars. When Tavares first visited Sochaux, his message was clear.
Le premier jour Monsieur Tavares est arrivé, on était au atelier du ferrage.
The first time that Mr. Tavares came, we were in the body shop. He sees the body shop manager and he asks, "What is your added value? What is the return on investment of this workshop?" And the manager stood there completely stupefied because that wasn't something we were used to working with. Today, that has completely changed. We have changed the culture because effectively today, from the manager to the operator, we think about the cost price. We know that we have to be competitive with countries where prices are lower.
How did you go about selling your vision to the workforce?
It was not very sophisticated. It was quite simplistic to a certain extent. You see, people, when I came to the PSA Group in December 2013, were working like hell. They were working 12 hours a day, eventually more. And the more they work, the more the results were read. So we started from a very simple recognition, which was that if we are in trouble, it's not because we're not working enough. We are working like hell.
One of the early challenges was to bring France's unions into the fold.
It's very difficult in Europe to take people out of the workforce. And you've got to remember that Peugeot took quite a hefty subsidy during the financial crisis to save the company. They had a $3 billion rights issue as well, but they were very close to going bankrupt. So I think the unions accepted that they had to cut costs. and it's been done through natural attrition as well. But he's certainly taken people and a lot of costs out of the business.
Carlos Tavares was capable to build up an alliance with the pro-reform trade unions, and just after a couple of years, it's crazy because all the political-driven trade unions are reduced to silence. Because, for instance, recently everyone was granting a significant bonus in the firm, and so it's not possible for these trade unions to speak anymore.
But would the unions become more difficult as PSA Group becomes more profitable?
With the 5 unions I have in my company representing 80% of my people, they have signed all the strategic plans, all the performance plans, and they have been one of the big supporters of this profitability improvement that we have delivered over the 5 years. I think they understand that this is a race. You see, it is a competitive game that we are facing every day. I asked this question to my unions in December 2018, and I told them, look guys, we are profitable, our situation is very good. I can hear here or there some tensions and some small issues. I don't want those issues to grow. And I asked my unions, should I ease a little bit on the accelerator pedal? And my unions told me, no way, President, don't do that. Keep it flat out.
The back-in-the-race targets were met 2 years early, heralding the next stage of Tavares' plan.
Back in the race and its operational excellence outcome is the foundation on which we are going to put the strategic profitable growth plan that we have called Push to Plus.
While Back in the Race was about restructuring and weeding out underperforming models, Push to Pass shifted the focus to expansion as Tavares pushed to compete with bigger rivals. PSA gets about 80% of its revenue from the European market, where automakers face a consumer slowdown and EU emissions regulations are accelerating the adoption of electric cars. Sales in China are also a problem, sinking by a third last year, making the car maker even more reliant on the wobbly European market. That explains its goal to increase sales outside Europe by 50% by 2021.
First one will bring the Peugeot brand to the US and a Canadian market. Second one will bring Citroen to the Indian market. And third one will bring the Opel brand to the Russian market. Those are the 3 big announcements on which we are putting our energy and our focus.
To get there, Tavares expects his staff to go the extra mile.
This is this concept of the extra mile that you talk about, where if one person fails because everyone's doing the extra mile.
If you manage the team only on the fact that we cannot fail and we have a very ambitious goal, then you are just adding tension, stress in the organization, and you are not giving anybody the possibility to fail, because if somebody fails and the team loses as a result of an individual failure, then that person will be in trouble. Which means that if you want to keep the possibility for each of your team members to fail, and at the same time the team needs to win, means each team member needs to go one extra mile beyond his own objective to cover the risk that among one of those team members there will be one that can fail. And that's very normal because he's a human being.
You spoke to Bloomberg in 2013 and you were talking about how you would like, you were at Renault still, okay, and you were talking about how you'd like to be the leader of maybe Ford or General Motors. So you've been thinking about being material for a chief executive for quite some time. Where does your self-belief come from?
Possibly from the fact that since I was a teenager, I was immediately passionate about cars, and then I became a mechanical engineer, started working for a car maker. At that point in time it was Renault, then went to Nissan overseas, Japan, the United States. And I love this industry. It's such a highly competitive industry because there are many, many contradictory things. It's capital intensive. Profitability is not very high. The number one guy in the industry is making 10% profitability, which is not such a big number.
Now, there was an interview in Les Echos, a French newspaper, and my office is abuzz with one part of the interview. The fact that you're at home at 7 o'clock every night having dinner with your wife. Is that true? Every night?
When I'm working here, yes, and that's the reason why you have so much time pressure on this interview.
All right, because, yes.
Yeah, no, that's
true. Because you've got to get home by 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Are you trying to show a new example for France?
I'm trying to show you that we are here to get results, not to make hours. And that's very important. You know, it happens to me to tell some of my top executives that they are working too much. It happened. I said to one of them, I say, hey, I'm worried. You seem tired. You travel too much. And your working days are too long. And that's not good. I want you to keep some bandwidth where you can step back, look at the talent management, and not be always trying to solve the operational issue every minute.
The acquisition of Opel gave PSA Group a lot of heft when it comes to scale. But is it enough to fund the autonomous vehicle development, as well as to accelerate the switch to electric? By the end of this year, for example, PSA has pledged that each model developed by its brands will have an electric or hybrid version.
You have to be very agile, if not even Darwinian, which means if you don't change, you disappear.
Opel is the latest automaker to benefit from the Carlos Tavares turnaround touch. PSA bought the Germany-based company from General Motors alongside UK brand Vauxhall in 2017. His task now is to further integrate the companies to save more money while driving vital investment for the future.
Well, as we move into new areas such as the transition to electric vehicles and also autonomous driving, you need scale. There's huge investments that are being undertaken by the car makers at the moment. And one thing that Peugeot didn't have before Opel was significant scale. So the addition of Opel gives them scale. They're now at close to 4 million units, and that allows these additional costs for new technologies to be divided over a wider product base.
Opel lost nearly $20 billion over 2 decades. After a year of Tavares at the helm, it reported profit of nearly $1 billion in 2018.
1 horsepower and basically the first car of Opel.
Tavares tapped Michael Loscheller, Chief Financial Officer at Opel, to head up the division. Tavares, he says, changed the way Opel thought about making cars, just as he'd done at Peugeot Citroen.
The key point from my perspective was a new mindset, a mindset really focused on performance and implementing things. And then he also gave us a lot of freedom for the important things of the business, in particular design and the positioning of our brands Opel and Vauxhall.
The big challenge at Opel was how to make low-margin cars in a high-cost country profitably. Loscheller got unions to agree to eliminate nearly 4,000 jobs through buyouts. Then there was a drive to reduce manufacturing complexity.
One of our car lines had 27 different steering wheels, but customers were not asking for 27 different steering wheels. So we brought this down to 8, and that is one tangible example, and we have many, many more where actually we reduced complexity without jeopardizing our customer offer, because obviously the customer is in the focus of everything we do. But it helped us to improve the efficiency because complexity is an enormous cost driver.
To get a better idea of what a German car should be, I met with a design director who showed me the Opel GTX experimental concept car.
We are a German brand, and German precision is certainly something which is ingrained in German engineering and also in a certain kind in German design. And that also is something which helps us to separate the brands within the PSA group, with the 3 French ones and then the British one and the German one, into 2 different directions, which is great, and you can see it at the car, I believe.
So tell me what I should be looking at when I'm looking at the German precision over here.
Well, very clearly, I think this very proud, this bold face, we call it the visor, which is encompassing all the technical elements, and actually what we call it, it's a techno hub. All the high-tech elements like radar, LiDAR, all these elements are kind of inside of the visor.
I notice we don't have any door handles.
Since this is a show car, a concept car, what we do is we open up the whole side, and we'll see it in a second once we open it. So the whole side of the vehicle opens up.
Despite initial success at Opel, PSA faces formidable headwinds. The big question is still about scale and how to fund the huge investments needed to develop electric vehicles, self-driving cars, and mobility services.
He's been successful with his SUVs over the last couple of years. This is the fastest growing segment. Going forward, the fastest growing segment will be electric vehicles. And because Tavares cut back significantly on R&D and CapEx over the past 4 or 5 years, which has boosted his free cash flow, will he have the technical ability to compete with its peers as opposed to just competing on price, because their cars aren't as technically advanced as the likes of the competition?
So once again, when it looks to coming to making deals and alliances, then for Tavares it would make sense if they went to someone who already had some sort of pretty significant electric car technology.
That's correct. And if you look at the German manufacturers, since the financial crisis, they've made great success of their sales in China, the turnaround in Europe as well. And that's allowed them to build their balance sheets. And they have very strong cash within their balance sheets. And that's allowed them to invest heavily in electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles over the past 2 or 3 years. That hasn't necessarily been the case for Peugeot, because it's had to, cut back in these areas to bring its cash flow back up to where we would expect for a European car company.
Just this year, PSA is said to have been in talks with Fiat Chrysler and Jaguar Land Rover.
Being bigger may not help the maneuverability of the company. You have to be very agile, if not even Darwinian, which means if you don't change, you disappear. So in that direction, you don't want to be bigger, you want to be very compact, very agile, very Darwinian. On the other side, if you have a significant change in the regulations that imposes on you very significant investments, which are going, of course, to be a burden for your midterm plan and for your profitability.
Which is exactly what we have here.
That may be one of the reasons why you would like to share this burden with other companies and have a volume scale effect. And sharing the burden of those R&D investments, that may be a reason. On the other side, this is our attitude. We are, as you mentioned, we are too small to have the leisure of not considering opportunities. I think that would be counterproductive. So yes, we are open, but we are not targeting any specific company or entity just because we have a strong balance sheet, we are highly profitable, we have the technology to face electrification, we are developing our autonomous technology. So why should we look for that as a simple goal? It is not a goal, it is an opportunity if it comes on the table.
In the past 5 years, Tavares, with the turnaround at Peugeot and Opel, has resurrected 2 struggling car makers. He now finds himself at the centre of a rapidly changing auto landscape as the biggest players talk mergers and alliances. It's an arena he clearly relishes.
And this is why I think the period we are living from now up to 2030 is going to be absolutely exciting. And despite the chaos, I'm very, very excited. I think this pressure we have, these disruptions we have, are going to create breakdowns in the industry, and that means that opportunities will be there on the table.